every summer, the technorati of the West Coast and now the country and around the world engage in the festival slash getaway slash desert summer camp known as Burning Man. And I've been watching the Burning Man phenomenon for many years, basically almost since its inception, and it's been interesting to see it evolve and change as the culture and wealth of the Silicon Valley itself has grown and changed. And one aspect of the Burning Man phenomenon I wasn't tracking as closely was addressed in a recent article in Salon that I found extremely interesting. The article was given the headline, and I know I always say we writers don't always write our own headlines, but the headline, pretty descriptive: Burning Man, a utopia for guests, was hell for many workers. It's a really interesting look into what it means to be a working person at Burning Man. It was written by Nicole Karlis and Keith Spencer. Keith has been on the program before. Nicole is a staff writer at Salon. She writes about health, culture, and social issues and gender politics. Keith is a critic, essayist, and editor there, and he tends to focus on science, tech, and political issues as well. And they both join us now, Nicole Karlis and Keith Spencer. First of all, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Great to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back. And Nicole, great to have you. So first of all, let's talk about the creation of this article. What got you started on looking into working conditions at Burning Man?
Well, I guess I'll start answering this one and let Nicole finish it. So I had written an article, more like a piece of criticism a few years back that, you actually interviewed me about for Jacobin. It was called "Why the Rich Love Burning Man." And it kind of began a period of time where I was sort of interested or curious in like the political and social issues that surround Burning Man. And because of that article, actually, a worker, one of the seasonal workers who works at Burning Man, reached out to me last year, and he said, "Hey, I'd read your previous article, Why the Rich Love Burning Man, Jacobin, and like I know you think critically about this stuff, and I wanted to reach out about some of the worker issues that we've seen there." And he said, his name was Ricardo Romero. He's interviewed a lot in the article in Salon. He said he wanted to talk to me about how he was let go or not rehired because he was trying to organize the workers and start a union. And as you know, that's illegal. It's illegal to fire somebody or not rehire somebody because they're organizing or trying to organize a union. And often workers that this happens to, they never know that's why they were fired. But because I think Burning Man was sort of a disorganized work environment, one of the managers who was above him actually told him you shouldn't organize, you're not going to get rehired. And I worked on interviewing him and a lot of other guests or not guests, volunteers and workers in the past year. And then Nicole started helping me and kind of finished the story. I got injured about a month ago, and I broke both my wrists in a bike accident, and so I couldn't finish. I couldn't type, obviously. But Nicole was did a lot of more of the reportery interview stuff, and really dug much deeper into the story than I had been. I mean, Nicole, you should talk about some of the people you spoke to, or the path, the rabbit hole that you went down studying this stuff.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear that. Nicole, also, since you write about health and culture, there was a huge health dimension to this story too. So what was, at least mental health, and what was your reaction when you got brought into this? What was your initial kind of gut response to the story?
Well, since Keith and I both live in San Francisco, Burning Man is a really big part of the culture here. We both have friends, and people are always talking about it, and it's really placed on a pedestal. So I think that, when really talking to the workers and the volunteers and seeing how they were treated, and really seeing that, like, the Burning Man organization there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. As we mentioned in the article, the whole concept of Burning Man, it really talks about living up to these 10 principles, which are about demodification and radical inclusion. And the way in which these workers were treated, and volunteers, the ones we spoke to, it did not align with their values. So I was really interested in that part, and really giving a voice to these workers and these volunteers who had felt like they had been mistreated, and they were. But the health issue, the mental health issue, of course, that was just really shocking to me. How many of suicides happened in this one department. As I mentioned in the article, I interviewed a national suicide expert and psychologist, and she was just shocked by how many there had been, and we found that there was at least on average one a year in this department. So of course, in my opinion, I do think that Burning Man has an ethical responsibility for the mental health of their workers, especially given the conditions in which they're working in the desert. It's like a really intense environment, and also there's a huge emotional aspect of this experience too. These workers are part of a community that they really feel a strong connection to, and then when they're mistreated and they're essentially ostracized from that community, it can be very devastating as well.
And there's the whole concept, and maybe I'll have Nicole and then Keith answer this one. There's a whole concept of emotional labor. The idea that when you go to work for certain organizations, they expect not just whether it's your manual labor or your time in or your thought given to executing the job itself, but they expect and they seem to offer in return a kind of dedication to the cause that the job represents, but then suddenly that their side of that emotional labor agreement, which is obviously unstated, gets pulled away and people just feel bereft. And it seems to me that's something that came through in the interviews here, that people might violate even an unspoken, unwritten rule they didn't even know about, and next thing they know, they're excluded from this job in this community that had helped define their lives and their meaning. Is that a fair takeaway, Nicole?
I would absolutely agree with that. And definitely what you just explained definitely factored into how willing or unwilling people were to talk to us. There was definitely a lot of fear we observed around people sharing their experience with us because they were afraid of the backlash from the community. So that was a really interesting aspect of this as well.
So Keith, I want to go at a slightly different angle with you if I would. I want to do, just indulge me for a second. I want to tell you a story that goes back 40 years when I was sort of like rootless and looking for a direction in life in the Bay Area. There was a place called the Whole Earth Catalog Store. And it was, it came out of the Whole Earth Catalog. And I went there, they said they were hiring. And I went there, and the whole tenor of the conversation with whoever was the supervisor talking about was like, well, you know, these bureaucrats in Sacramento told us that we have to stop saying that the way to get hired here is to volunteer and work for free for a while and become part of our community, and then we might hire you. They said that's against the law, you know, kind of like, oh, those lame-o suits. But it still wouldn't hurt, wink, wink, you know. And my immediate takeaway was, I don't want anything to do with these guys. But it seems to me like in reading your story on Burning Man, that there was a little bit of that left, that somehow the labor protections that we've come to agree on as a society over literally hundreds of years of bargaining and struggle and organizing and lawmaking and debate, it's suddenly like we're too hip for that. Is there an element of that in the Burning Man management, you think? Because you follow tech a lot, and I feel like it's a reflection of the tech culture too. Yeah,
I mean, I'd say that That's definitely true. But besides the tech industry and the culture of the tech industry, I think it's actually a fairly common issue in nonprofits, like where the line is between volunteer and worker. And like because a lot of nonprofits. I mean, I've worked for nonprofits before where there's sort of this whole ethos of like, we're doing something great for the world, and therefore like you should volunteer your free time to help us because you'll feel good about it and you'll help contribute to our mission or something like that. But I used to work at a nonprofit theater company, and we would have people come and like lick envelopes for us to send out mailers. But that type of volunteerism is really different than being in a remote, inhospitable desert environment with no or limited cell phone reception and no like internet access really generally, and being in this isolated place with all these other people, like to the extent that it's easier to get taken advantage of because it's not an obvious place to report to HR. But the way that it does, I think, connect to the tech industry is that the tech industry, much like Burning Man, has really succeeded branding wise in convincing lots of people that what they're doing is like innately good for the world. Like there are people who aspire to work in the tech industry, and then they go and they do something like they're literally just helping program Facebook's ad platform so that more people like see ads or have better targeted ads. But they like deeply believe that they're part of this kind of like utopian, like, this like techno utopianism that is exported by the tech industry, and that has been. I mean, it was kind of like there was this symbiosis between the end of the counterculture hippie movement and the beginning of Silicon Valley, where like a lot of people thought that computers and the internet were going to subvert the man in some way, and like all these tech industries are innately countercultural or inherently changing the world, even if they're just like surveilling us or being part of like eroding our privacy or doing the things that tech companies do. And so it's not surprising to me that Burning Man and like Silicon Valley have become synonymous in many ways, or that so many Silicon Valley people and tech companies will like literally have like meetings there or getaways there and encourage their workers to go there. I believe it was Elon Musk who said you can't understand Silicon Valley without going to Burning Man. And there's a very funny, famous story about the former Google CEO like getting caught cheating on his wife at Burning Man. Things like that. Like they are really part and parcel in some ways. So the sort of tech takeover of it is not surprising in that sense. And that's not to say that everybody there is like in tech or is wealthy or something like that. Obviously, as you read in the article, all these volunteers and workers tend to be kind of like, working class, blue collar people who are working with their hands out there, and they're just doing this as a sort of a part-time gig. Yeah,
of course. But and Nicole, I guess one of the takeaways I got from your article was that, well, frankly, one of the takeaways I got, and I don't know if you agree, is that Burning Man has somehow managed in its relatively short lifespan to replicate the class divisions of society as a whole, and that it not only did not step up for its workers when they were troubled, but sometimes didn't do right by them, and sometimes used the kind of obnoxious hipster language to cover up the fact that it wasn't doing the right thing by its workers. And when there was a protest coming out and saying we're protesting the protest or whatever, they just came across as not very nice people dealing with workers who were working hard for them and suffering. Am I being maybe a little too unfair, or what do you think?
No, I think the way you're describing it definitely is what we were articulating in the article and through our reporting. I think it really, in essence, raises a larger question of, can these counterculture movements succeed? I do personally think that Burning Man started with the best of intentions, but once it started growing and turned into what it is today, it hasn't really been able to hold on to those original values and intentions. So I don't know. I mean, it's like we said in the article, it sought out to sort of burn the man and be this utopia and be really different, but really it's no different than a big corporation that, you know, we see outside of in the regular world today, in the default world.
Well, the default world, as they call it, which most people would call the world. So, and that too, I would argue, is part of the problem. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, but it's a terrific article, and it really, I encourage people to read it. Again, Burning Man, A Utopia for Guests was held for many workers. Final question for either or both of you. We got about a minute left. There has been another Burning Man. I think since you wrote this, have you heard any updates since then that people might be interested in from the workers you talked to?
We have not. I mean, they just got back a couple of days ago, so it's decompression time, but I think that we are anticipating hearing from them and curious to see how this article impacted the energy on the playa this year.
Yeah, we did, Nicole, you did hear from one worker, a couple of people who reached out to you on Twitter who did an interview who said, wow, this is exactly what I experienced, who sort of corroborated what our said.
Well, that's very good to know. And it, for some reason, all things, it reminded me of a song from the musical Hair called Easy to Be Hard. And the whole theme of it was you talk about utopia and doing wonderful things for people around the world, but you're really kind of a dick in person. So that was, for better or worse, that was my takeaway from your article about Burning Man. So unless you strongly object, we'll have to leave it there. But Nicole Karlis and Keith Spencer, writers for Salon, thanks for the great work and thanks for coming on the program.